Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. Now we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a few different styles, but I think it is most definitely fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different kinds of Imperial Stouts. Now the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style and a sub-style that I have had from these guys before. This one is supposed to be very nice, and it's also one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden too. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to Arlöv, which is kind of between Lund and Malmö. I live in Lund, of course, so it's a bit to the southwest of me, a bit to the northeast of Malmö, and we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Nerd Brewing. So this particular beer is called When. It comes in at 11% ABV, and they're describing this one as a Fluffernutter Imperial Milk Stout. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. This is of course the 2022 edition, and there will no doubt be another edition of this one in the future. I'm not sure if there has been another one in the past, but yeah, Nerd Brewing are always playing around with different recipes and doing different things to them. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokalt och Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for February of 2023. And yeah, I think this is maybe the second beer that Nerd Brewing have released this year. So we'll keep an eye, as we always do, on what they're releasing, and you'll see them appearing here on the channel over the next little while. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how it got on. This is my second or third Imperial Milk Stout that I've looked at from Nerd Brewing as well. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Nerd Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember that you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go up to the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many others, and we will no doubt be adding to that over the next little while as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Nerd Brewing once again. So, Nerd Brewing, as I've mentioned to you before, were originally based in Malmö in Skåne in southern Sweden, and the company was founded by Hannes Gruber and Karin Karlsson back in 2015, and they had their premiere at the Malmö Öl and Whiskey Festival that year. But both of these guys were big beer enthusiasts, and they just wanted to kind of get into the industry. But Hannes had been a home brewer for quite a long time, and he got very good feedback on his beers, and so it was this that inspired him to go for it and turn professional. But he comes from a background in software development, software engineering, whatever you want to call it, and he was taking care of the brewing side of things, whereas Karen was an entrepreneur in the and trader in the IT industry, and she was managing the business side of the brewery, although she is no longer part of the company. But they started up with a very modest production, and they've become one of the most highly decorated breweries from Sweden on Untappd, and they've maintained a very high reputation since then. So the beers were initially brewed at the Lilla Ölfabriken facility in Rosengård. Chad Beer, of course, were one of the ones that started out there as well, and there were a couple of beers brewed at South Plains next door as well. But the company officially joined with Chad Beer and Lilla Ölfabriken to form a collective, and they continue to sell their beers under their own brands. But Nerd Brewing, of course, focus mainly on Imperial Stouts, but over the years they have released a few IPAs, barley wines, and some other things too. I believe we reviewed the Switch New England Double IPA, which I thought was very, very nice actually, and we reviewed a barley wine. I forget the name of the barley wine now, but that was also very, very good. In the early days though, other than a few festivals around Sweden, it was very difficult to get a hold of the Nerd Brewing beers. But from 2018, they've been selling a few of their beers through Systembolaget, and it's been going very well for them. But in March of 2021, there was a new collective announced called Molecule. This includes Elm 11, Nerd Brewing and Chad Beer, and these guys have their brewery in Arlöv now, which started off with a 1500 litre brew kit, and they are working to expand that and adding more tanks and all of this kind of thing as time goes on. They're opening up the brewery about once a month or so to have a little tap room and things as well, which is also quite interesting. So I need to go there the next time they open it up and make a little video, because I missed the second time unfortunately, and I was able to pop in quite quickly the first time to have a wee look at what was going on. But yeah, in late 2022 they had their first brew pub day, and I think the last one was a couple of weeks ago. That was at the start of February, and they are going to have one I think a little bit later on too. But as of March 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 120 different kinds of beer. Like I said to you, the majority of them are Imperial Stouts, and there have been a couple of other things too. I would love to see these guys do like a Scotch ale, a barley wine, and you know, a Doppelbock and stuff like that. But yeah, from what I understand these days, Hannes is the one designing the recipes. He sometimes takes part in the brewing, but it's mainly Anders from Elm 11 who is doing the brewing for Molecule Brewing these days. So from under Molecule Brewing, like I say, you've got the Elm 11 beers, which are mainly the kind of modern sour type things. Chad Beer is where they're releasing the lagers and the IPAs, and Nerd Brewing are where you're going to find the big malty things, mainly Imperial Stouts. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about the Molecule Brewing Collective and Nerd Brewing. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. One of the cool things to point out about Nerd Brewing is one of their mottos is open source beer. So Hannes tends to share all the recipes for his beers on the website, so you can go and learn how to brew these things yourself. But yeah, if you, as I say, check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open up. There you can see, as I was saying, Nerd Brewing open source beer, the 2022 edition there. When Fluffernutter Imperial Stout, you can see this one has a purple top there. You can see I've made a little line with a knife around there just so I can actually get the thing open on the video, and there you can see the other Nerd Brewing symbol on the back of the bottle too. So this beer, I believe, oh, did I pay 70 or 80 for this? I want to say 80 Swedish kroner, so that's about €8. £7 sterling, about $9 American, something like that. 330ml bottle, and as I mentioned earlier, it's 11% ABV, an Imperial milk stout, and it was released as part of the local Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget in Sweden for February of 2023. Let's get this guy out, we'll get on with the tasting, and we'll see what it's all about. So let's do this. Oh, this should be quite nice. No smoke on the opening there. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, let's get this guy out. We'll get on with the tasting and see what it's all about. Oh, sounds like they're testing an air raid siren or something like that inside. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but there we go. So, anyway, you can see that this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect of an Imperial Stout. This looks absolutely lovely. So, yeah, before the head disappears, about a half finger of a frothy, I would say quite bright tan head on this one. Medium-sized bubbles in there. It looks very, very nice. Yeah, the head on this one is of course going to fade away to be a thinner foamy layer as time goes on. It's already starting to do that. But yeah, this beer looks great. So, I'll just let you have a little look at the head on this one. That looks very, very nice. Put my face behind there so it zooms in, so you can see some medium-sized bubbles there, a few foamier ones toward the top. There's a little bit of a bumpy head there, but like I say, that has faded away to be a very kind of thin, wispy layer with a thicker ring around the edge of the glass. And pardon me, you do have that lovely, very dark ebony rosewood colour to this one. If we shine the light through the beer, it does have a little bit of, yeah, it does have a little bit of kind of dark ebony rosewood colour coming out of it. But yeah, it's very nice. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malt that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But when it comes to imperial stouts and black beers in particular, it's quite difficult to affect the colour of these beers with it is quite difficult to affect the colour of these beers with barrel aging and stuff like that too. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one, just one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look pretty nice, I have to say. Yeah, nothing else we really need to say about the appearance of this one. Nothing particularly surprising about it when you consider what style it is. So yeah, let's just have a wee look at the aroma and see what this one is going to have in store for us. Oh yeah, that does smell very, very nice, I have to say that. So thumbs up to Nerd Brewing once again. It's not unexpected, we've had many Imperial Stouts from these guys before. That's one of the things when you come to a brewery like this. If you want a good Imperial Stout, you can't go wrong with something from Nerd Brewing. We just have to say that. But this does smell very nice, I have to say. Yeah. So aroma wise, this is very, very nice. It's interesting for me. I can't remember when the last time I had one of the Nerd Imperial Stouts was, because as I say, reviewing a lot of beer, tasting a few things at work and stuff like this as well. It's a bit difficult to keep track, but from memory, this is one of the more kind of dry and woody Imperial Stouts I can think of that I've come across from Nerd Brewing. And as I've said in many reviews before, the thing that I quite like about Nerd Brewing is that all of these beers, when it comes down to brass tacks, and when it comes down to the backbone of the beers, they're all kind of like old school RIS. They're all a little bit old school Russian Imperial Stout in their characteristics. So yeah, that is something that I do quite like about these things, I have to say. And you can get that out of this beer as well. So yeah, let's just break this down and describe it a wee bit more. So yeah, the backbone of this beer for me, absolutely, you get some of that kind of really well-fired, toasty bread crust coming out of the beer. That is very, very nice actually. So yeah, roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. There's a good little bit of woody character coming out of this one as well for me. I've got a lot of, there's a lot of kind of almost caramelized rye bread to this beer as well, in my opinion. So yeah, that's another interesting characteristic of this one for me too. So yeah, a good little bit of caramelized rye bready character. Some kind of wholemeal brown bread on top of that as well, which is quite nice. There's almost just a little bit of a cakey element to this one too. I'm wondering if there's a bit of wheat and oat in this beer. Yeah, no, this one, right. It's got barley malt, wheat malt, oat malt, and lactose in it. It's also got some peanuts in it. So maybe what I'm thinking is wood is maybe peanut, actually. So that's kind of interesting too. So, a little bit of food for thought there. Yeah, I never really eat peanuts and stuff like this. I've just never been a great fan. So yeah, it is interesting because yeah, for me, like I say, this beer does have a little bit of woodiness to it. But then when I think about it, it's maybe just the power of suggestion, having looked at the bottle. But you certainly get some of the kind of more salty, peanutty type quality out of it. But like I say, roasty, well-fired bread crust, a little bit of woodiness in there as well. You've got that kind of highly caramelized rye bread, a good little bit of brown bread in there. There's quite a bit of chocolate coming out of this one for me too. The chocolate's interesting because it has, on one end you're getting a little bit kind of toward the back of the nose, you're getting a wee bit more of like a sort of 60-ish, 70% dark cocoa chocolate, but further forward you start to get a slightly heavier milk chocolate note out of this one, maybe 40% cocoa. And that's probably a mix of the oats and the lactose in there that are giving you that bigger impression of milk chocolate. There is quite a bit of brown sugar to this beer as well, I have to say that. So for me, in the middle of the nose, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of kind of treacle and molasses in there. I don't get so much of a brighter caramel out of this beer, but in fairness, because of the peanuts, I think it gives you a little bit of an almost salted caramel kind of impression, actually. So that's an interesting point to make about this beer for sure. You do get a little element of kind of salted caramel out of this one. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really nice. The malt base on this one, it is really quite interesting. I think I probably have had beers with peanuts from Nairn Brewing before. It's a little bit, the thing is, with Nairn Brewing, it's a little bit hard to keep track of exactly what you've had, because it's always little tweaks to these Imperial Stouts that they have. So there's always a few interesting things going on with these, actually. But yeah, it's you always, as I say, you always get a good Imperial Stout, but it's quite difficult to keep track in your head exactly of what you've had from their brewing as time goes on. But as I say, aroma wise, for me, this one, it comes across a bit more woody and salty and nutty and things compared to some of the other ones that we've had. But you know, Nairn Brewing always have that little bit of RIS character to them. On the hoppy and fruity side of things, then, to round off the aroma, for me, this beer, you do get a little bit of hoppy character out of it. I think this is maybe an old school kind of Columbus Chinook sort of job, this one. There's a little bit of earthiness in there. There's quite a wee bit of, you know, a sort of, you do still get a little bit of a floral character and a little bit of a kind of wee bit of pine resin in there. Remember, the longer you keep this beer, the more the hoppy character is going to drop out of it, so that's worth bearing in mind. Good little bit of grassy note as well, and yeah, that is quite interesting. So a bit earthy, bit herbal, nice little bit of floral character, and you've also got that nice grassy note out of it too. On the fruity side of things, it is a bit more, it is quite typical Nairn Brewing, you know, there's a lot of like plum and raisin to this one, those oily fruity notes. So yeah, plum, a bit of raisiny sharpness, a bit more of a kind of plum oily character. Figs definitely, and of course you've got a mix of the, you certainly have a mix of the kind of, you've absolutely got that mix of kind of blackcurrant and blackberry coming out of this one too. But a lovely smelling beer, and you know, I wouldn't expect anything less of Nairn Brewing, to be honest with you. So yeah, let's have a little taste of this one then and see what it's all about. I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So yeah, this one is the When a Fluffernutter Imperial Milk Stout at 11% ABV from Nairn Brewing in Arlöv, just outside of Malmö, here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that's nice. I think we've got it just at the right temperature as well. Ooh. So, first impression of this one, as always, in the aftertaste you get that RIS character, that special bee malt that Hannes loves so much. He's a very nice guy, Hannes. I've met him a good few times. So you've got that lovely roasty toasty you've got that lovely roasty toasty Imperial Stout quality to this one. It's Russian Imperial Stout, and then above that you can feel the big silky mouthfeel out of this beer. It's very enjoyable, this one. Like I say, it feels like it's been a wee while since I reviewed a Nairn Brewing beer. I honestly can't remember when the last one was. A couple of months ago, I think. But this is good, so I'll say thumbs up to him for this one. Yeah. In terms of the overall feel of this beer, this one, it's actually, because it's an Imperial Milk Stout, obviously it's going to be sweeter, but it's definitely one of the slightly sweeter and creamier Nairn Brewing beers I've had, stating the obvious, of course. But I like this one. I have to say, this one is really quite interesting, and it just feels a bit different, but it could well just be that I've not had an Nerd Brewing beer in a wee while, but we'll do as we always do, we'll break it down and we'll describe the flavour for you a wee bit more in depth. So let's focus on that middle third of the palate first, as we always do. So for me, the backbone of this beer, it has this really quite dry, woody character coming out of it. There's a bit of well-fired bread crust in there as well. And yeah, maybe toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more, of a kind of lighter woodiness out of it, which I really do like. So yeah, I do get quite a bit of juicy, fruity character out of this one too. It's interesting. I think the fruitiness in this one is a little bit more prominent for me compared to other Nerd Brewing beers we've had in the past. But yeah, so yeah, backbone of this beer, as I say, smooth, kind of, but slightly dry toward the back. There's a bit of woody character in there. There's well-fired bread crust. There is a bit of a kind of more rye bready character sitting above that, for sure. There's a touch of an almost kind of like sponge cakey layer as well, which is interesting. You've got the rye bread, the slightly more kind of rough rye bread, then this kind of sponge cakey layer. Then you've got a layer of an almost kind of wholemeal brown bread for me. So you've got this really layered character in the beer, and that's something again that's an almost inherent characteristic of Nerd Brewing based on my previous experiences. So yeah, for me, like I say, it's quite a, on top of that kind of brown bready layer, one thing I would say too is you get a bit more dryness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste you go, but above the kind of wholemeal brown bready layer, you start to get some nice chocolatey character out of this one. So you can feel there's a sort of, the chocolate gets brighter, and sweeter the further forward you come, but you also get the more roasty toasty character coming out of it as well, which I certainly enjoy. So on that more roasty toasty side of things, at the further back on the palate, I'd say you've maybe got an 80% cocoa chocolate, and it has got a wee bit of roasty dry character to it, but as you come further forward you can feel the chocolate just mellows out, and maybe toward the front of that middle third of your palate you have a little bit more of somewhere in the region of like 50% cocoa chocolate. So that's quite interesting for me. And within that kind of sweeter part of the chocolate, you start to get some of the peanutty flavours. It's got a little bit of an almost kind of salty peanut flavour in there. The peanut for me comes out more and more the further into the aftertaste that you go. But above the chocolatey layer, you can feel there's a circle in the middle of your palate. So there's a really highly caramelised treacle molasses type thing coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that goes together is also very, very nice. So yeah, the base of it, you have that kind of more highly caramelized treacle molasses type note. Above that, you have you've got a little bit more of a kind of straight up sweeter caramel in essence. And I would say, in fairness, one of the things I know that Hannes likes to do with these beers is he likes a long wort boil. Quite often they leave the worts kind of boiling overnight. But I don't get, the interesting thing about this one is that I don't get so much of the leathery character out of this beer that I have in other Nerd Brewing beers. So maybe they've done something a wee bit different with this one. Yeah, for me, this beer is nowhere near as leathery and dry in its brown sugary character as I've had previously from Nerd Brewing beers. You know, there's two things you can do with an Imperial Stout. You can either do like a double or triple mash, and that gives you the big thick mouthfeel, or you can do the long wort boil to thicken the beer up. But if you do the latter, you get this big leathery brown sugar note, and I don't get so much of that out of this beer in comparison with others. Now, it could just be the presence of the lactose in there that's kind of smoothing it out and sweetening the beer up. But yeah, I do think it goes together quite nicely in that sense. So yeah, above the chocolatey layer, like I say, you've got the kind of treacle molasses type note in the very dead centre of your palate. Underneath that, you get the slightly sweeter and brighter caramel, and then a bit of the nutty note. So I think the way everything goes together in this one is really nice. Yeah, it's it really is an interesting beer, this, and how everything goes together. Yeah, so a thumbs up, a big thumbs up from me, this one. So on that middle third of the palate, I think that's everything we need to say. So let's look at the back third of the palate then. The border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a bit of that kind of brown bready build up in there, a mix of wholemeal and kind of more like rye bready character, but the back third of your palate is very similar in how it goes together. But as I always say, the back third of the palate tends to be a bit drier and a bit more bitter than the other parts of the palate. That's just kind of how it goes. So yeah, toasty, well-fired bread crust on the base, even more dry. Above that, you've got the kind of rye bready layer, which feels a little bit more tall and a little bit more airy. You've got a little bit of an almost kind of sponge cakey note out of this one, which is good. And then above all of that, you've got a wee bit of a more kind of wholemeal brown bready character as well. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that sense is really quite nice too. So yeah, above all of that, you get a little bit of I would say you do get a little bit. You can feel a little bit of the kind of wheaty dryness and stuff above that. I do get a little bit of bitiness out of the wheat there above the kind of wholemeal brown bready layer, and then above all of that, you're getting some of the kind of yeasty esters out of it too. So yeah, the kind of wheaty, the sort of wheaty esters in there, and the kind of bready esters, you get like above the wheaty notes, you're getting a little bit of a more kind of yeasty characteristic out of this beer. So I really do like how all of that pieces together. So for me, you've got this the yeasty note for me. It's like a slightly lighter wholemeal brown bread. There's a little touch of honeycomb in there. I always get honeycomb on that back third of the palate for some reason, and there's a wee bit of cracker and stuff. So yeah, back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, things just kind of squash down and condense together that wee bit more. And generally speaking, with this beer, I would say you get more of the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust out of this one. It's the classic Nerd Brewing sort of RIS characteristic, as I call it. For me, I always consider these beers to be more old school Russian Imperial stouts in a lot of ways. So it is still a milk stout, and it's on the sweeter side of things for Nerd Brewing, but generally speaking, for me, pretty much all of Hannessey's beers lean toward that Russian Imperial stout side of things. But yeah, I think that covers the malty and yeasty side of this beer. Let's focus on the hoppy and fruity side of things. Back corners of the palate, absolutely good little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it gets a little touch herbal, and as you push toward the front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more sort of floral and things as well. So yeah, it's good. Round the front curve of the palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of oily, grassy sort of thing out of this one, and a wee bit of zestiness too. But yeah, like I say, the earthiness is there, the bit of herbal characters there, a little bit of floral green component too, and then around the front curve of the palate, there's actually quite a wee bit of zestiness on the grassy side of this beer. Of course, you could keep this beer a little bit longer, let more of the hoppy character drop out, but I just wanted to try it, so why not? You always get a good stout from there. Brewing, I was in the mood for it. There you go. But yeah, the hoppy component in this one at this point in time is still quite prominent. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the green component. Let's focus on the front third of the palate and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in this one. So kind of nice brown bready layer. The base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more, the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more kind of, you've got a little bit, you've got not as much roasty bread crust in there. It's more like a kind of sweeter rye bready sort of thing. And then above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that sense is really nice. The fruity side of this beer, it's kind of, to be honest, the fruity side of the beer is quite typical Nerd Brewing, to be honest with you. We've had this kind of character many a time. It's kind of like I described in the aroma. So at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit of raisin in the top, but not too much in this one. I actually find this beer is a little bit more kind of plummy. So it's got that lovely oily plummy character. You get a little bit of kind of sultana. You get a little bit of kind of sultana, dry, white, green, grapey character out of this one. Then as you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit more kind of figgy character to it. So yeah, plums, sultana, sort of fig as you reach the middle, and as you go into the front half of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit more. You do have a little bit more of kind of blackcurrant base, and then a bit more of a kind of oily blackberry top to it, if you like. So yeah, you get these lovely, for me it's the plums and the blackberries that come out of this beer really nicely. So yeah, this beer for me, the fruits are a bit brighter in it as well, actually, which is kind of interesting. But when as I say, when I think about the overall comparisons with other Nerd Brewing beers, for me, the fruits are a bit brighter. This is a bit more woody, and while it is a milk stout, generally speaking, if we're talking about Imperial stouts, you would expect a milk stout to be a lot more kind of creamy and sweet, if you like. But this is definitely, it is, I still always find the Nerd Brewing beers are more Russian Imperial stouts rather than anything else. They always have that kind of roasty bitterness to them, which I do enjoy. I do like that, because you don't find, there's a lot of pastry stouts and stuff out there these days that, I don't know. For me, I always like a very sweet Imperial milk stout, or more of a kind of old school RIS like this, which is why I always keep coming back to Nerd Brewing, because that's what you're going to get. But yeah, this is another very, very solid beer, and definitely one of the sweeter and more fruity ones I think that we've had from this brewery. But I think we can round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. For me, definitely bottom end of full bodied, smooth carbonation, one of the more kind of slick and oily and creamy beers that we've had from their brewing in the past. But yeah, in terms of IBUs, it's a wee bit difficult to pick out. Because you can easily conflate dryness and bitterness with together in this one. So for me, what is it? It must be about 60 or 70 IBUs, this one, but there's quite a bit of dryness in there too, so it will feel as if it's a bit more. It could be pushing the 80 IBU mark, to be quite honest with you. The maltiness, as we said, a bit of dryness and roastiness in there, a little bit of smoothness, quite a wee bit of sweetness too. As we said, we've talked about the IBUs, we've got the big fruitiness as well, and yeah, the way it goes together is really very, very nice in that sense. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes together. It's a really nice Imperial stout, this one. Like I say, it is like an RIS, but it's on the sweeter side of the RIS for me. And the Nerd Brewing, of course, on the Nerd Brewing scale, which is a wee bit different, this one is most definitely one of the sweeter and more juicy ones that you're going to come across. But again, I like it. The main question should always be, do you like this beer? For me, the answer is yes. Another very solid Imperial Stout from Nerd Brewing. So big thumbs up to Hannes for this one once again. But let's leave it at that. So yeah, this one was the When Fluffernutter, an Imperial Milk Stout at 11% ABV from Nerd Brewing, part of the Molecule Brewing Collective in Arlov just outside of Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Really enjoyed this one. We'll see when we can get another nerd review up on the channel at some point in the future. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from their brewing as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, Slange, Skål, cheers, see you guys in the next review.